Hello everybody, this is HR. Welcome to my channel and welcome to the second part of transforming my Chucky doll. So, if you watched part 1, you'll know that I completely transformed Chucky's head. I re-sculpted it, gave him new hair, new eyes, a complete upgrade, an overhaul, right? So in this video, we're going to be focusing on transforming Chucky's body. Now to start off, I'm actually going to use the original plush body that the Chucky doll came with. However, it's just too small now. Because I've made Chucky's head a lot wider and bigger, it's too small. It was small before, but now it's a lot smaller. So the plan is actually to put Chucky's body in pieces around the armature and to basically shape it back out with cotton and fabrics. Even though the Chucky body is too small right now, the armature is actually too tall. Using my heat gun, and that allows me to pull it apart with some pliers. And then I'm also going to use heat to reattach it. So I'm just gonna mark out the areas where I'm gonna be cutting Chucky open, mainly in his torso, his arms, and his feet. And from there, I'm gonna stretch him out. However, I am gonna be wearing a dust mask through all of this because there's a lot of cotton and a lot of dust, and I'm gonna do my best to keep that out of my system. Now there's probably going to be a lot of extra cotton that I won't need with Chucky, but I'm going to put it aside because I'll still need some of it to reshape out his body. Okay, so now I'm gonna put the pieces back on the armature and get them in place so that I can start to fill out the cotton again. You can see this huge gap in between where it used to be connected. That's how much we're going to stretch them apart and make them a lot taller. So now I'm going to put the cotton back around the armature, but in order to do that, I have to glue it in place with some fabric and some hot glue. I'm just going to take this black fabric and wrap it around the areas that I don't want the cotton to escape and basically just reshape his body. So to shape out Chucky's waist, I actually just used a large rubber band and I just tied it around his middle section, and it actually created a really nice shape for his waist and his hips. So the hands that the Chucky doll comes with is way too small. Even before I made the Chucky doll bigger, it was too small. However, the original Spinster's Chucky doll has the exact same hands, but they're just bigger. So I want to use its hands instead. So in order to use these hands, I'm gonna actually create a silicone mold using this silicone putty. I'm gonna wrap it around both hands and then create a resin cast. Okay, so now I'm gonna let this cure for about an hour to be safe. Okay, the silicone mold looks good and I think it's ready for casting. So for the resin, I'm gonna use this 2-part 10-minute resin, amazing casting resin, along with some flesh tone colorant. So I'm going to be careful to pour in the resin halfway so that I can put in a piece of the armature, so that way I can attach it back to the body armature when the time comes. Okay, looks like it's cured and ready to take out. I'm not worried about keeping the silicone mold intact. It was only meant to be like a one-time use, and hopefully it works out. So as I'm taking it apart, it looks like the hand came out good. So I'm gonna do the same for the other hand, and then I'm gonna sand them out under the Dremel. Now I'm just gonna do a little bit of hand sanding and bringing back in the details with these little, basically just like little sanding tools, files to bring back little details in his hands. I'm also gonna be re-sculpting the parts that need to be smoothed out, and I'm gonna be putting the proper scar that's on Chucky's hand. The scar on the original hand, it was always inaccurate. I'm not sure why they always put the scar there, but it's supposed to go across his hand, so I'm gonna sculpt that in. Alright, I'm happy with the way they're sculpted, and now it's time to paint them. The painting process is going to be very similar to what I did with his head in the first part, so I'm just gonna prime it with some flesh tone, gonna get the base flesh tones in there with hand painting, and then use airbrush to put in some nice reds and blues to really create that flesh look that Chucky has. So now I'm going to use an acrylic paint pen to give the details on his fingernails. All right, these are looking really nice. I'm very happy with how they turned out.
Okay, so now that I finished his hands, I'm gonna attach it to its body just like I planned to, and it seems to be fitting on nicely, and I'm really happy that it does. But now I have to create and shape out his arms. So to do that, I'm gonna use both some fabric and some sticky fabric. And this sticky fabric is actually something that's called like a sofa patch. It's something you would put over a sofa if it had, you know, a hole over it or some sort of tear. Well, in this case, I'm just gonna be using it to attach fabric to Chucky. And it's gonna be a very similar process to what I did with Chucky's torso. I'm filling in the gap by taping the fabric together and then filling it in with the stuffing that I kept. Now it's time to sculpt the scarring on Chucky's body. So instead of using epoxy sculpt like I usually do, instead I'm using something called Worbla. Now Worbla is great because you can attach it and lay it flat on almost any surface, and with some heat, in this case my heat gun, I can melt it down, soften it, and then start to sculpt with it. Now the surface of Worbla is kind of rough and textured, but I'm not too worried about that because most of these scars will be covered, and I'm gonna smooth it over a little bit using some wood glue and a brush. As you can see, it's really easy to create creases and sculpting details, and the more hot it is, the more details you can get in. But for this, I'm just gonna be adding the scars and the wood glue. All right, the Worbla is dry. It dries very quickly. So now I'm gonna go in and add the detail work, paint in his scars and the flesh tone, and match it as close as possible to the established flesh tone that I have for Chucky already. Now, these scars aren't very visible in the film. They kind of are covered with his clothes, but just to be safe, I'm gonna sculpt it in anyway. Okay, I am happy with that. Like I said, these won't be very visible, but I'm happy it's there anyway.
Okay, so now it's time to get his clothes ready. The original clothes that the doll came with are just way too small now, and these will not work. So instead, I'm going to be using the plush Good Guy doll Trick or Treat Studio outfit that came with that doll because it's a lot bigger and it can fit on this new body properly. I actually got lucky in finding this outfit. Somebody was just selling it on Facebook for like 40 bucks. It's kind of rare to see this particular version of the outfit sold because it's like a more affordable version of the Good Guy outfit, and I got lucky because I'm going to be tearing it up anyway. So now it's time to weather his clothes, and to do that I'm going to be using some soft pastels of browns and grays to really weather it up and make it look dirty and grimy, like there's like, you know, dry blood and stuff like that on there. So I want to be careful about where I make the cuts. I want them to line up with where I made the scars on Chucky's body. And to do that, I'm going to actually place the outfit on there so that I could be precise on where the cuts are on the body. Now for Chucky's overalls, it's going to be a similar process to his shirt. I'm going to first apply just some brown paint all over it and smear it together just to make it look overall dirty and like it's been, you know, sent through a giant fan. And then I'm actually going to just use the same process, some soft pastels. And Chucky's overalls are interesting because in all the films they seem to be different colors. I'm working with the one that I have and I'm happy to have it, but in the films they tend to be lighter or darker, so I'm just working with what I have. However, I am going to be using some gray pastels just to make it look a little bit lighter and faded out and just like it's withered and old. So before I weather up the overalls, I want to actually put them on the body so that once again I can line up all the scars directly and make sure that you can see some of the scars that I made on his body. Like I had mentioned before, they're not super visible, but I wanted to make sure that if you do see them, that they are there. Going in with a gray soft pastel and just dusting it up a little bit, and that's going to make it look a little faded. This is looking good. I'm really happy with it, and I think we're ready to move on. Okay, now it's time to add the weathering and scuff to Chucky's shoes. I'm using the same shoes that the original doll came with. I'm just gonna add some paint to them and scuff them up with some browns, grays, and a little bit of soft pastels. So now that I have the actual shoes scuffed up and weathered and they look all nice and dirty, I have to get the shoelaces. And to do that, I'm gonna be using this NECA Toy Capsules collection. Now you're probably wondering, why do I have this? Well, in one of these 9 capsules is some Good Guy shoelaces. Now there are a lot of sellers that make Good Guy shoelaces, but a lot of them are international and would have taken a while to get here, or they're just a little bit too pricey and out of my budget. However, I was able to get this on eBay for about 10 bucks. So I get everything that's in here along with some decent shoelaces that come pretty close to the ones in Bride of Chucky. They're not the exact same font, but it is very close and I'm happy with it. I think they'll work. Now, just like the shoes, I'm gonna get them nice and dirty and grimy, and then we'll lace them in. Okay, so if you like lacing shoes, I wish I was like you, because I do not like lacing shoes. I don't like lacing anything like this that deals with anything that's super tiny, because I have really big hands, but it'll be worth it and it'll look good. Okay, that's one down and I still have to do another one. Okay. So putting in the laces wasn't fun, but it's totally worth it because it looks great. Now, when I was putting on these shoes, I couldn't help but think of Jennifer Tilly when she did it, when she was making Chucky and putting him together, putting on his shoes. Yeah, let me know if you thought that at all. Okay, so now it's time to attach Chucky's head to his body. Now, I have to kind of improvise as I go, as I've done with this whole project. I'm gonna use a part of this armature that's from his body, and I have to be careful because it's the only piece I have left. I'm gonna attach it right here to the part that is meant for Chucky's head, like I would any other part of the armature. And then I'm gonna take Chucky's head and remove this plastic rod from it. Okay, so now that I have the plastic rod off, I'm gonna put some epoxy sculpt around the joints of the armature and throughout the piping of this, but leave the bottom base alone so that it can still move around and so that Chucky can have some mobility. See, by not putting epoxy on the bottom rod of the armature, it's allowing the pole to still move around. And the goal is to put Chucky's head around this. Okay, so while the neck joint dries, I'm actually gonna go back in on the head and resculpt some of his staples in his head. That's one part that I wasn't super satisfied with. So using the epoxy sculpt, I'm just gonna go over and re-sculpt these and just make them better and paint them up while that dries. So in the first part of the video, some people asked why I didn't use real staples. Well, at this point, Chucky's head has become very solid and solidified, and to put staples through something like this would just crack the sculpt and it wouldn't look very good. So if I were to do something like that, it would have to have been when the clay was still soft, and that was way at the beginning of the process. So I'm just gonna do what I do, which is sculpting. So to attach his head, I'm gonna try multiple things. The first thing I'm gonna try is this epoxy glue. And then I'm gonna try to tie it around it to keep it attached. That's the goal. Hopefully it works. Okay, so update. The epoxy actually dried on really nicely, and Chucky's head is on there pretty sturdy. Like, I could move it around, and I'm shocked that it worked. But one thing that I want to fix now that I have it on here is that his neck is coming off a little too thin than how it should be. I think his neck width is about like here. So what I'm actually gonna do is remove his clothing from here to the base of his neck, and I'm gonna actually sculpt in a little bit with the epoxy sculpt and paint it. It's gonna be a little bit of a hassle, but I think it'll be worth it because I think his neck will look better. And some of you may be looking at this and thinking it looks fine, and I think it actually is. I'm like really happy with it, but I'm gonna give it an attempt and just see how that looks. All right, I'm finishing up resculpting his neck. So I'm gonna let this cure for about 12 hours or so, half this day, and then we're gonna come back and paint it. And now when I wrap his shirt around his neck, it's a lot more accurate because now it doesn't make his face look as big. His neck is in proportion with his face, and it's better. It's a lot better. I'm happy with that. Okay, I think Chucky's just about done. I may add a little bit more weathering to his body, maybe a little bit more grays and fading to his clothes and stuff, but I'm really happy with how his neck turned out, really happy with how his body's been structured, and yeah, we're almost done here. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really appreciate your patience and waiting for part 2. And if you like this video, please consider leaving a comment, give it a like, share it, and also please subscribe so you can see my future projects. And I really hope you enjoy the big reveal of my Chucky doll. Thank you all so much and enjoy.